Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it. You can go back to your seats. Sex, money, religion, politics. If you want to blow up your Thanksgiving dinner or any other family meal at that matter, just bring up any one or a combination of those controversial and taboo subjects, right? Any one of those topics brought up among family and friends can instantly provoke a response and a reaction, and sometimes it's not all that productive, is it? Those topics, each and every one of them, are very personal and very intimate. We each have our own experiences that impact the way we look at those subjects. We each have our own sense of self-identification that affects our point of view and our opinions when it comes to those things. So when those topics come up, we become highly sensitive. There's a part of our pride, our nature, our sense of being that is directly affected by any one of those four topics and how controversial they can be. And sometimes as those topics are brought up and maybe something rubs us a little bit the wrong way or goes against our experiences or our nature or our opinion, all of a sudden it provokes a response that is not productive at all, but instead it can be very destructive. In today's world of modern technology, where we have right at our fingertips instant responses to anything, these topics are compounded even more and become more electrified and more challenging for us. And isn't that ironic? These tools that have empowered us to communicate even more closely with each other have really caused us to become even more farther apart, especially when it comes to those subjects. In the gospel lesson today, we touch on 3 out of those 4 pretty taboo and controversial subjects: money and religion and politics. Those religious leaders, those Pharisees, went to challenge Jesus. They were not coming to him to expand upon their knowledge and their understanding of matters of church and state. Instead, they were seeking to trip Jesus up, as we hear from the gospel lesson. They want to take him and what his answers are, and they want to spin them for their own good and use them against him. Much like many of the politicians we have in our world today. But Jesus isn't having any of that. And Jesus' response to their challenge has been foundational for us as Christians as we approach issues of church and state right from that time that Jesus spoke these words in the Gospels. Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's. Now, if you came here this morning, or if you're tuning in online, and you were expecting me to endorse a particular candidate for the presidential election, I'm sorry, but I'm going to disappoint you. I'm not that stupid, and I really enjoy our family meal together, and I don't want to blow that up in any way. I want us to keep gathering together, giving thanks to the Lord as often as possible. I am acutely aware of the fact that if I were to take a side of an issue or a side of an aisle or a side of a candidate on any of those matters, that immediately I would alienate about half of the people who come here on a regular basis. For statistics have shown that Lutherans very much reflect what's going on in the world nationally, in our country nationally, when it comes to political opinions. About 40 to 45% of Lutherans identify with Democrats, about 40 to 45% identify with Republicans, and about 10 to 15% are in the middle or undecided or independent or whatever label you want to put on them. So to take a side either way would really violate the trust and the faith and the family that we have with each other. But I will use today, in today's gospel lesson, to share with you some of my concerns and some of my thoughts on how we as Christians continue to approach those issues that are before us each and every day. Now, the media and the way it presents things would have us believe that the election of one person every 4 years really changes the direction and the attitude of our country. But I'm sorry to tell you, that's not quite true. I had the blessing 15 years ago of taking a seminar about church and state, which was a behind-the-scenes look at Washington, D.C. The speaker of the Lutheran Hour, Dale Meyer, put together this 1 week behind-the-scenes tour and meetings in Washington, D.C. So I went down there during the summer, and I had the opportunity to meet with the House chaplain, to meet with congressmen, to meet with all sorts of the important people in Washington, D.C. We met and had drinks at the Republican Club. We had a private dinner with some congressmen there at the Republican Club. But the one experience that stuck out for me was the day that we went to meet a lobbyist. This was a lobbyist who used to be a Lutheran pastor. And we went to his big, beautiful, plush offices. And as I had the opportunity to walk down the very, very long hallway to his very, very big and comfortable office, I saw this lobbyist in big blown up pictures shaking the hand of every single president going back to Lyndon Johnson over 40 years before I was even born. And I thought to myself, imagine this multiplied by hundreds, no, thousands of lobbyists that are in Washington, D.C. And think about the consequences of that. Though the faces of our elected officials change on a regular or semi-regular basis, some stay way too long, but the behind-the-scenes power and influence of money, especially through lobbyists, has remained the same, and where the real control of government is. And think about this. What happens when most politicians are voted out of office or they leave office? They become lobbyists. They still stay in Washington, D.C. So let me say this. Whoever is the president on January 20th, 2021, I am still deeply concerned about the direction of this country and the way things are going for us. We are more divided than we have ever been, politically, economically, socially, religiously, name it, in one way or the other. And we have no trust in our leadership or our government. A recent Pew study reported that back in 1964, 77% of the American population trusted in the government and believed the government was doing good things for the people. In 2019, that statistic was 17%. 17% of Americans think the government is doing good and they trust in it. How sad is that? And how sad is that for us as Christians? Because the Bible teaches us that government is a gift of God put here for our well-being and our good, but we're having a hard time trusting that and believing that and following that. And why is that? Well, I believe it's not just the people we elect to office, but there's another powerful force at work that I am deeply, deeply concerned about. I recently came across an analogy that has been making its way on social media. It tells the story of if you were going to go to the Southwest desert and you were to collect 100 red fire ants and 100 large black ants and put them together in a jar, they coexist together without any issues. No problems, they just kind of live and do their thing. But when somebody comes along and shakes up the jar, they begin to tear each other up, destroy each other, and eat each other. They think that they are each other's enemies when the real enemy is the one who's come along and shaken the jar. My friend, we are living in a nation now where the jar is constantly being shaken, and we are forced to deal with the consequences of it. As much as it's the political agendas that are tearing us apart, more so than that are the various platforms of media that are promoting those agendas and their own agendas in the attempt to shake up the jar and get us to be more divided and to tear apart each other. In today's world, It's no longer the world where you turn on the 6 o'clock news and you get just the facts of every story and you can make up your own mind. No, whether it's news channels, news media, it's the social media, whatever the form of media may be, they are unapologetically trying to promote agendas that persuade and manipulate our opinions and our thoughts each and every day, sometimes with a complete disregard for the truth. And all of that is aimed at getting us not to be one united country, but to be so torn apart and divided from each other that we don't see what's really going on. So if you are getting your news from just one channel or one newspaper, you are not getting all the facts. If you are believing everything that you see on Facebook or Twitter or whatever social media platform it is, without looking behind the scenes to see if there's more to it or there's another side of the story, you are being manipulated. And if you are going to decide who you're going to vote for based upon political ads, the jar is being shaken. Now more than ever, it is vital, if you are going to vote, if you are going to have an opinion about political or social issues, that you dig much deeper into what's going on, that you consult many different sources, many different areas of information and backgrounds, and look at all sides of the issue. It is absolutely pertinent because there are serious and dangerous and destructive things going on in our government and with the media, which are greatly threatening us not only politically, but how we live as Christians, how we exercise our spirituality. So having said that, what is our role as Christians as we approach the ballot box? First and foremost, we must remember that by our baptisms into Christ Jesus, that we are members of heaven. We are citizens of the kingdom of heaven. That is a greater label and has more power than being an American, a Republican, a Democrat, whatever the label may be. And our baptisms empower us, even though we live inside the jar, to step outside the jar and see things and look at things differently. To do our best then to calm down the things that become animosity and tear us apart. It is absolutely vital for us as we approach the ballot box that we remember first that we are Christians and upon the kingdom of heaven we stand, and we need to wrestle with whatever the vote may be, whoever the candidate may be, we need to wrestle with it from our Christian point of view and look at those issues that affect us as Christians and then vote our conscience according to them. And then we need to remember this. At the time of Jesus, there were 6 major kingdoms and powers in the world. Now, 2,000 years later, there are over 195 countries and nations and kingdoms in the world. During the course of the history of the Christian church, many kingdoms have come and gone. From the Roman Empire, to the Persians, to the Mongolians, to the Napoleonic Empire, to the USSR, just to name a few. They've come and gone. But through it all, the church, the kingdom of Christ, which is eternal, has stood and has offered peace and comfort in the midst of the chaos that so often surrounds us in our nations and in our countries and in the worldly kingdoms that surround us. And this is what is most important for us. We are members of the kingdom of heaven. So it affects how we approach the box. We don't become so overwhelmed with the noise and the shaking of the jar that we live our lives in fear. We live in confidence and we exercise our personal choice and power. But we remember most important of all, when the things of the emperor fail us, the things of God are with us and last forever. Amen.